All right, so business advice from the 1500s. You wouldn't expect it, right? But we're talking about Niccolo Machiavelli, that name, synonymous with, power moves, political maneuvering.
Yeah.
He wrote The Prince, this treatise on leadership. And guess what?
Yeah.
It's still relevant for navigating today's business world even.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, The Prince was for rulers originally, but those core ideas about strategy and influence and, achieving goals, they're timeless.
Timeless, yeah. It's like he accidentally wrote a playbook for CEOs now.
Totally, yeah.
Okay, so one of the most, infamous lines from The Prince is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Now, before anyone listening starts practicing their evil laugh, can you break this down?
Yeah.
Because it's a little intense.
It sounds a lot harsher than it is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's not advocating for just being cruel for no reason.
Right.
But he's saying that to be a good leader, you have to command respect.
Okay.
And sometimes that means making tough decisions,
Right.
setting expectations that maybe not everybody's gonna like.
It's like that whole Steve Jobs thing, right?
Yeah.
Not exactly Mr. Warm and Fuzzy.
Right, exactly.
Welcome, Future Success Stories, in your channel S for Success. If you're finding this video helpful, hit that like button. It's a small click for you, but a big boost for us. Don't forget to subscribe for more tips and tricks to level up your life. We're just getting started, and there's so much more coming your way. Exclusive insights, powerful strategies, and real stories that can change your game. Your thoughts mean the world to us, so drop a comment and let's make this journey to success together.
Expectations that maybe not everybody's gonna like.
It's like that whole Steve Jobs thing, right?
Yeah.
Not exactly Mr. Warm and Fuzzy.
Right, exactly.
But people respected his vision.
Yeah, people were in awe of it. And he was known for being demanding,
For sure.
but also for his impact.
Yeah.
And that goes back to, you don't have to be cruel, but being decisive, having that vision, and being willing to make those tough calls.
So less about striking fear in everyone's hearts, more about just respect for your authority, which I think is something a lot of people, even today, still struggle with.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that leads into another thing that's really relevant today, which is his emphasis on strategic planning versus just luck.
Right.
Especially in this world of, startup moving so fast.
It's not a business plan to leave things to chance.
Exactly. He was all about anticipating the challenges and analyzing everything and always having a backup plan.
Yeah.
A plan B, a plan C. Think about it like chess.
Oh, yeah.
You've got to be thinking several moves ahead.
Right.
And I mean, we see that today with these successful companies.
Oh, yeah.
They have that kind of Machiavellian foresight.
Well, yeah. I mean, look at Netflix when they switched from DVDs to streaming.
Right.
That was huge.
That was like a power move. Straight out of The Prince.
Yeah.
They recognized the opportunity, seized it, changed everything. And, that kind of leads us to another idea here.
Okay.
Virtue.
Virtue. Okay. Full disclosure, I had to
Right.
look up how to pronounce that.
Of course, yeah.
But what does it mean? And why should, our
Yeah.
listeners care?
It's basically about having the strength of character, the skill set, to be able to shape your own destiny.
Okay.
Take those opportunities when they're there, even when it's tough, even when you have to make difficult decisions.
Wow.
In a business sense, think about it like resilience, adaptability, and always taking action.
So less hoping for the best and more making it happen.
Exactly, yeah. He said the people who just wait for fate to come around, they end up as pawns in someone else's game. He was all about being the one calling the shots.
Right. Writing the script, not just reading it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
This all kind of circles back to leadership, though, right?
Sure.
You've got to build your team,
Yeah.
foster that loyalty. That seems like it would be on the to-do list.
Oh, absolutely. And he was really insightful about this.
Okay.
He knew you need a strong team, but he also warned against blind loyalty.
Wait, so you're saying, having a bunch of yes men
Right.
just nodding along,
Yeah.
not good?
Not good, he would say.
Okay.
True loyalty is about having those people around you who will challenge you, who will tell you when they think you might be wrong.
Right, give you a different perspective.
Exactly. Even if it means disagreeing,
Yeah,
even if it's hard to hear.
it's that trust but verify, right? You trust the people you're working with, but you want them to make you better too.
Yeah.
Which, I think even leaders who've been doing this a long time, it's still tough to hear sometimes that
Oh, yeah.
you might be going the wrong way.
It's hard.
We've all seen what happens if you have people too afraid to speak up.
Right, it rarely ends well. And he understood that. A leader who's never challenged, they get complacent, they're out of touch.
Right.
They can even become arrogant.
And now we're, one wrong move and it's on social media.
Oh, I know.
Blowing everything up.
It's amplified so fast.
Yeah.
And that can be the downfall.
Yeah.
That takes us to another important Machiavellian principle.
Okay, what's that?
Reputation is everything. He knew this, even back then. He understood the power of perception.
Makes you wonder what he would think now.
Oh my gosh.
With the 24/7 news cycle and social media and everything's a PR crisis.
Yeah, I know. It's like he predicted it. Yeah, without even knowing.
Without even knowing.
He knew that perception can be even more powerful than what's actually happening.
Right.
And that one misstep can take down a reputation that you've been building for years.
So how do you balance that? You
Yeah.
need that strong presence, maybe even be a little intimidating,
Yeah.
but also knowing, anything could go wrong at any minute.
Right.
That's where the whole fox and lion thing comes in.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a perfect...
From the prince.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the fox and the lion.
But what does that actually mean, though? Especially, practically speaking.
So it's about taking the best qualities of both.
Okay.
The fox, that cunning, strategic thinking, always staying ahead of the game.
Right.
The lion, that's strength, boldness, being willing to take charge.
So sometimes you're strategic, sometimes you're bold.
Yes.
Sometimes you're like the diplomat, and sometimes you're making a stand.
Exactly.
Reading the room, right?
Yeah.
Knowing what the situation calls for.
Yes, and being able to adapt. Because that's what he believed separated the really great leaders.
Okay.
The ones who could be both.
Right.
If you think about someone like Indra Nooyi,
Okay.
the former CEO of PepsiCo.
Okay, yeah.
She's a great example. She was known for being really strategic, when she expanded PepsiCo beyond just sugary drinks, got into the healthier options.
Yeah.
Thinking ahead, like the fox.
Right, like those market trends, seen them coming.
Exactly. But she was also a really strong leader, decisive.
Right.
Made big moves, like when she acquired Quaker Oats.
Yeah, I remember that.
A lot of people questioned it at the time, but she had the courage, like a lion. And it worked. She really embodies that whole fox and lion idea
She does.
that Machiavelli talked about.
So if we had to kind of sum up, Machiavelli's wisdom
Yeah.
for someone leading a company now,
Yeah.
what would it be?
I'd say it's this. Being a leader, it's way more than just having the title.
Go.
It's knowing how to use that power well. And for that, you need a bunch of things. Strategy, decisiveness. You gotta understand people.
And be able to kind of roll with the punches.
Oh, for sure. The world's always changing, and if you can't adapt, you're gonna get left behind.
It's like surfing or something,
Yeah.
You gotta read the waves, adjust. Sometimes just go with it.
Exactly.
So we're talking about strategy, power, all that. But shouldn't leaders be self-aware too? Knowing what they're good at and not so good at.
That is so important. Machiavelli knew that.
Okay.
You got to know your strengths to use them, but also your weaknesses, so you can build a team that fills in those gaps.
So your team makes up for what you lack.
Exactly. You don't have to be good at everything, but you got to be good at finding the people who are.
Right.
And you know what that takes? Humility.
Humility. Doesn't sound
Yeah.
very Machiavellian.
Right. You'd be surprised. Machiavelli knew that arrogance can be a leader's downfall. You gotta be confident. Yeah, but also humble enough to really listen, learn from your mistakes, and accept that you don't have all the answers.
There it is again, right?
Yeah.
That balance, strength and humility, confidence, but you listen. It's wild how these ideas from, the 1500s, they still matter now.
Yeah, they do.
It's one thing to read the prints,
Right.
but actually using those ideas,
Right.
that's different.
It is. It's about taking those principles and figuring out, okay, how does this apply to me, to my work, to the problems I'm facing?
What would Machiavelli do? But in my shoes with my problems.
Exactly.
So maybe that's the real takeaway. It's not like a rule book.
It's more like a framework.
Yeah, a framework for thinking about how you lead, how to be more strategic, more, thoughtful about it, and hopefully more effective. It's a journey.
It is a journey, not just a destination.
And like any good journey, got to plan for it.
You got to be adaptable. You need a little bit of that virtue.
A little virtue, right, to deal with whatever happens along the way.
Exactly.
Which I guess brings us to the big question.
Yeah.
If Machiavelli were here, on this podcast.
Right.
What advice would he have for, like, people leading now in the 21st century?
Ooh, I love that. First of all, I think he'd be blown away by how much has changed.
Right.
The internet, social media, how fast information travels now. He was no stranger to crazy things happening.
Right.
But even he might be a little overwhelmed.
Machiavelli trying to figure out, like, cryptocurrency
I know.
or, like, AI and what's ethical, he'd be lost.
Or lose him. Totally. But through all that change, I think he'd see that some things stay the same.
Like what?
Human nature, how power works. Those things he wrote about in The Prince, they're about those deep patterns that don't really change.
So what would be his top tip
Yeah.
for today's leaders? Like the 21st century update to The Prince.
Adapt or die.
Okay.
That would be it. Being able to read a situation, knowing the challenges are coming, and changing how you do things. He'd say the best leaders, the ones who thrive in chaos, they're the most adaptable.
It's like that saying, right? It's not the strongest or smartest who survive, but the most adaptable to change.
Exactly.
And didn't Darwin say that, like, way later?
I think so, yeah.
Feels very Machiavelli, though.
It does. I also think he talked about building a strong organization.
Not just a team, but a whole culture.
Okay.
A system that can handle anything. Shocks from outside, from inside, whatever. Because in a world that never sits still, being resilient, that's how you survive.
So it's not enough to be a cunning leader. Your whole team, everyone you work with, has to be able to adapt too.
Exactly. You have to give them the power to be leaders themselves, in a way. Because nobody can handle everything alone.
Right. And that feels especially true now, right? Like the problems we're facing, they're so complicated.
They're intertwined.
It's going to take all of us working together to fix them.
Absolutely. And that's where I think Machiavelli's message, even though people call it cynical, it actually has hope in it.
How so?
Because if leadership is about more than just getting ahead yourself, if it's about building something bigger, leaving something behind.
A legacy. Right. Then there's room for idealism, for a sense of purpose.
Using what you have, your power, influence, your platform, to do some good in the world, make things better.
Exactly. And that idea, that's something that still matters today, even more than back then, I think.
Yeah. It makes you wonder
Like that.
if we could, like, beam Machiavelli into the present, get his take on all this.
Yeah.
Would he be impressed by how far we've come? Or totally horrified?
Right. Like, would he even recognize the world anymore?
Exactly. It's fun to think about. Part of me thinks he'd be, I don't know, maybe even a little overwhelmed by just how big everything is now. Global, everything's connected. The technology changes so fast.
Right, it's a lot.
He knew chaos, but this is like next level.
It's different now, yeah. What would he even think about AI? I don't even know. Or cryptocurrency. He'd probably just throw his hands up.
Right. What have you done?
Exactly. But, even with all that's new, I think he'd still see those core truths, people. Yeah. How we work, how we act when it comes to power. That's what's at the heart of The Prince, right? Those patterns, those stay pretty consistent.
So if you had to guess, what would be, like, his biggest piece of advice for leaders now? Like, if he was updating The Prince for 2024, what's the big headline?
Adapt or die.
Wow. Okay, straight to the point.
That's Machiavelli for you. Be able to read the situation, know what's coming, and change how you're doing things accordingly. He'd say, look, the best leaders, the ones who win when things get messy, they're the ones who can roll with it.
There's that saying, right? It's not the strongest or the smartest, it's the ones who are best at adapting that survive.
Exactly. And didn't Darwin say that, like, centuries later?
Yeah, he did.
Proof that Machiavelli was onto something. I also think he'd be big on building a tough organization.
What do you mean?
Not just a strong team, but the whole culture.
Right.
Like, the system itself has to be able to handle shocks, surprises, anything that comes up. Because things change so fast, resilience is how you make it.
So it's not enough to just be clever yourself. Your whole operation, everyone you work with, has to be able to adapt.
Exactly. It's about giving people the power to lead themselves too, because no single person, no matter how smart they are, can do everything alone these days.
I like that. And it feels especially true with, like, the problems we're facing now on a global level even. They're so big and complicated.
They're all connected too.
Yeah, it's going to take all of us,
Absolutely. And that's where, even though people say Machiavelli was cynical,
which he kind of was.
He was, for sure. But I see hope in that message.
How so?
Because if being a leader is about more than just looking out for yourself, if it's about something bigger, something that lasts.
Building something that matters.
Yeah, that leaves room for, like, idealism, purpose.
It's using what you have, power, influence, to make a difference for good.
Exactly. And honestly, I think that message, it matters even more now than it did back then.
I agree with you. Well, we've done our deep dive on Machiavelli. All about power, strategy, and it turns out a lot of really relevant advice.
Who knew?
I think it's safe to say that The Prince, even after all this time, it still has something to teach us about leadership, especially now with everything changing so fast. How to deal with uncertainty, how to make sure our influence, however we have it, is used for good.
Yeah, and that the best leaders are always learning themselves, right? They're adapting and they're helping others do the same.
Perfectly said.
Okay.
As always, thanks for joining us
Thank you.
for this deep dive. And we'll leave everyone listening with this thought. How will you embrace your inner Machiavelli? In a good way, of course. How are you going to find that balance between ambition and, doing things the right way, strategy and compassion, power and using it for a purpose?
Good questions.
Big questions. Until next time, everyone, keep learning, keep thinking critically, and keep trying to be the best leaders you can be.